Good morning, students. Today I'll be discussing about more about classes and objects. So classes and objects is it's in the next chapter. So I'll be explaining a bit from that chapter also, but mostly we'll be focusing on these classes and objects only for in object-oriented programming chapters. So what is class? What is object? Now an object is an instance of a class. An object is defined by its class. So object is an instance, an example of a class. Now you will see that in the later programs in the following chapters, uh, all the programs will be mostly associated with classes and objects or similar to that. So this chapter, this concept, classes and object concept is very important for you to understand. Now an object is defined by its class, and an object is created by a class. So it determines everything about an object. So what is a class? Now a class is a user defined data type used to implement an abstract object. With a class you can create an object. With a class you can create an object. So a class is a blueprint that defines the variables and the methods commands to all objects of a certain kind. Now, when you say a class is a blueprint that defines the variables and the methods commands to all objects of a certain kind, now these classes and objects, the concept is new, but it's a bit similar to the structure program that we have done in class 11. If you remember, after arrays we had structure chapter. So in arrays we had variables, collection of variables of similar data types. In structures we have collection of variables of dissimilar data types. So here is an example of a structure. Now here, this is structure keyword, and this structure name. So this is a user defined data type. So here you can see that the variables employee code, EMB name, EMB designation, EMB salary, they are of different data types: integer, character, float. Now a structure tag is ended by a semicolon, since this is a variable definition only, declaration only. So now these are variables, all are of different data types, but all associated by a single structure tag employee. So they all belong to this structure named employee. Now, so this structure tag is defining these variables to be used by a structure variable. And keep in mind that I've already told you that until and unless a structure variable is declared, no memory space is allocated for this structure. So if you see the syntax, the format between a structure and a class, you can see that it is pretty much similar, except that the keyword struct has been changed to class, and there is a new addition called as public or private protected, like that. These are called as access specifiers, which I'll explain in later chapters. And along with that, you have the same variables of different data types. Here they are called as data members. And a new addition is this member functions. This member functions, void, display, void. Now this member functions is a new addition in object oriented programming. Now uh, before, structured programming was used a lot, but however, as the complexity of the program increased, structured programming was itself was not secure enough. Means like in terms of security, in terms of the complexity of the program, structured programming itself could not uh, solve the problem. So the problem was there was no separate functions to defined to access these member variables, and all of these member variables could be accessed by anywhere. So what happened was that uh, after that, programmers they created this class. However, earlier times the keyword class was not used. It was used, the features of this class were used, but with the name struct only. Later on, only changed to the keyword class. The new addition in the classes and objects were, the main ones were these access specifiers. So depending on these access specifiers, public, private, protected, uh, users had access to these, or the programs had access to these data members. Now these data members can be accessed only by the member functions or by the object, depending on public, private, protected. If it is public, the object can also access the data members as well as or, but if it is made private, even the object of a class cannot access its own data members. So now moving on, how so a class is a blueprint that defines the variables and the methods commands to all object of a certain kind. So that defines the variables. So these variables and the methods, so these are the methods. So this is the method, void, display. So here, so a class defines the state and behavior of an object. So what is state and behavior? If you flip on to the previous page, the state of an object encompasses all of the usual static properties of the object plus the current usual dynamic values of each of these properties. Behavior of an object tells how it acts and reacts to the outside world in terms of its states, changes, and message passing. So the state and behavior. The state means the variables itself, behavior, the methods. So a class defines the variables and the member functions that is to be used by the object. Now, so what is an object, or how do we define an object? So now we define object uh, as an instance of a class. When a class is defined, no memory is allocated. Keep that in mind. Similar to a structure, okay, similar to a structure, just defining a class with its data members and the member functions itself, the compiler will not allocate any memory space until and unless an object is created. So when when an instance of a class object is created, only the compiler will allocate memory space. So when an object is created, memory is allocated. A class by itself does not occupy memory space. So how do we define a class? Uh, uh, how do we define a class? By using the keyword class. Followed by the name of the class. This name of the class is user defined. So this is user defined. Now I already explained to you about user defined data types. You have already seen predefined data types. That is the primitive data types such as int, character, float. So these are the primitive data types, predefined data types, followed by the variable name. So you can see that to use a variable, you need to use the data type also. So preceded by so the data type along with the variable name. So only then the compiler allocates memory for the variable, and using when you use the data type only, the compiler understands that this variable emb code will store integer data values. So similarly here, this employee, or in the struct also and in the class also, this employee is a user defined data type. So this user defined data type has defines all of these variables, of different data types. Okay. Now, so the body of the class is defined under this curly brackets, this opening curly bracket, and this closing curly bracket ended by a semicolon. Okay, so this semicolon is very much important. This semicolon denotes uh, the termination of this class declaration. Okay, so since a class is defining only these variables and the member functions for an object, keep in mind that the purpose of a class is to declare an object. Okay, so using a class only, an object can be created. So example of a class is, you can see here also, a car, my car, Sumit's car, brother's car. So the class car represents the idea of a car, and the three objects represents actual cars. Now another example could be like fruits. Okay, so the name of the class is fruits, and based on the class fruits, you have different types of fruits like mangoes, apples, bananas. So all of these mangoes, apples, bananas are your objects. Okay, so in other words, okay, class is actually, in terms of computer terms, class is actually a logical representation, and object is a physical representation. Or class is your theory, and object is your practical. So a class is something that you think about it, and object is something that makes what you think come alive. Okay, so object with an object, you can present real world problems or real world views, real world ideas. Okay, so an object makes real world things come alive in the programs. So a class can be used to define other classes also, but that I'll explain in the following chapters. That is in terms of inheritance. Now, if you think about the syntax of the class, you can see that all of the class will be same only. The class syntax will be this is the keyword class. It is always written like this. Okay, and then this is the class name. Keep in mind there's no semicolon. So this is the opening bracket. The body of the class is enclosed within this opening and closing braces. This is the access specifier, and these are the data members. These data members are also called as attributes. Okay, so here, class attributes. In C++ program, every class contains certain information. These informations are called attributes. These are data attributes which are different from one program to another. It describes the qualities of the object that belongs to the same class. So using a class, now it becomes using class as an object. Now what happens is that you can have multiple data. I mean, real world problems you can associate with a complex program. You can build complex program. The earlier programs were just like a sum of two numbers. You add up two numbers. So you provide two input data. The computer will just process that and then give out the output. Or in terms of function programs also, where the focus is more on the logic. You tried the sum of two numbers using the function program. There you saw that the focus was more on the logic to perform. So however, it could not be associated with real world problems. And then later on you could see arrays. Now arrays somehow modified, where you could deal with uh, multiple data. Suppose like uh, marks of 100 students or roll number of 100 students could be identified by a single array name, all having the same data types. So array elements were created, or variables were created multiple. Now Again, you saw that in structure, uh, using the concept of arrays only in structure, you could relate with some real world problems, such as like if you remember the employee programs, where you can enter the employee name, employee age, employee designation, so and so. So real world the problems could be created with the structures. Now, same way, uh, you saw that in structures also, you can not only one employee's information, you can create data about, you can display data about multiple employees, 2 3 employees. That is by declaring 2 3 structure variables: emb1, emb2, emb3. Similarly, in classes and object also, you can do the same thing. So the main advantage of the classes is that you can create multiple objects, like suppose the class name is student, so you can create object names, say like stud1, stud2, stud3. Stud1 will represent one student's data, one student's name, age, marks. Stud2, so on, stud3, like that. So that is describes the quality of the objects that belongs to the class name. So using this declaration, what you can do is that you can have multiple objects accessing these variables again and again. So if you flip onto the next page, I'll show you what's and how do you declare an object. So now how do we declare an object? Using a class, we specify the state and behavior of an object, that is the member variables and member functions. And to access them, the member variables and member functions, which is defined in the class, we need to create objects. So the syntax to declare an object, we use the class name. So this is from the next chapter, classes and object. So here you can see that this is the main function. Now it is written much after the class declaration. Like I told you, the main function can be written anywhere from the in the top, middle, bottom. Okay, so here you can see that this is a class declaration. Okay, the access specifier public. This is these are the data members, the member variables, which are to be used by the objects, and this is the member function. Okay, so here you are defining the member functions: void, display, void. Okay, so this is the body of the member functions. Here this is the semicolon where the class declaration terminates. Okay, now you can see that the declaration of an object is inside the body of the main. Okay, an object is always declared inside the main function. Okay, and you can see that this is the class name, employee. Here, employee. So you declare an object using the class name. Okay, so this is how you declare an object. You can have multiple declaration of objects. Suppose like if you want, suppose like 2 employees information, you can also declare employee emb comma emb1 comma emb2, like that. Okay, so that way you can create data about employee 3 employees, emb1, emb2, all these details. Okay, so this is how you declare an object inside the main function. Okay, and to access the data members, to access the data members, this data member or the member functions here. Okay, you can see that in here the access specifier is made public. So public means these data members and the member functions is accessible by the object or any classes that is declared within this program. Okay, any parts of functions can access these data members. So here, to access the data members, keep in mind that only when you declare an object, when you create an object, the compiler allocates memory space. Till then, there no memory space is allocated for these data members, like the same in structure variables. So how do you access these data members? Using the dot operator, that is emp code. You can see the similarity, emp code equals to 100. So this, you are assigning the value 100 to this this variable. So only when you are declaring the object, the memory space is allocated for this in EMB code to store the value 100. Similarly, okay, in order to access the member functions, again you use the object name. Keep in mind, not the class name. The class name is just used to declare the object. Okay, but to access the member functions, or the data members, you use the object name. So here emp code. Similarly here emp.display. So this is how you call the member function. This is your calling function. Keep that in mind. Okay, so whatever you have learned in class 11, okay, the function chapters, as I told you, function, arrays and structures is very important. You can see the concept, the format is much similar to your structure program. Okay, arrays are used, and then you can see that, as I've told you, from function chapters, the calling function, the call function, function prototype, these three are the only added ones. It's very important. So here is your calling function. Okay, now these programs I'll explain to you in the following days. Okay, for now I hope that you have understood the concept of classes and object. Okay, if not, I'll put up this a tutorial for you also, so that you can get a better understanding about classes and objects.